ice water?
Look, I'm not a bad person, okay? First off, his mom pulled me aside and told me to do this. His fiance was in on it too. I mean, she got out of the way pretty quick. I mean, I know it doesn't look good for me here, but if you listen to episode 6, it's clear that ice baths are one of Lorenzo's favorite things.
I should have seen that one coming.
Conversation.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I'm just saying you're not a stiff person, you know? That's all.
All right.
But so you mentioned ice baths, and
Yeah.
I remember back actually when we were running cross country, I did ice baths, and like it wasn't like the worst thing in the world. I think I did it because like I was so like, oh man, I have to get my varsity letter or whatever, but
Yeah.
like I never revisited ice baths. But I mean for you it's like a huge thing.
Yeah, so I never did them in cross country at all. And actually, from what I found out, like doing it after the workout like that is not beneficial. Like
Yeah, that's what
not
I, yeah,
as
that,
beneficial.
yeah.
Which obviously, like, there's plenty of information now about ice baths, so it's not like we need to talk about all the health benefits right away. But for me, in like 2019, I don't know what like got me into it, but maybe just seeing stuff online. But I just started taking like cold showers, just like something different.
Yeah.
And maybe it was just like, I don't know, life was just like getting into the motion of things. Like, this is fun. Like, I can like brag about it, whatever. But in 2020, then I was like, oh, I should really explore this, and I just started like doing like cold plunges and stuff like that, and like building up to it, and I got like not weird, but like addicted to it almost. Like I have to do it now.
Yeah.
And so now my morning routine, when you used my bathroom a minute ago or whatever, you probably saw on there's a cold shower like every morning written on the wall there. So, or at least I try. You know, if you're feeling sick and stuff like that, I take a break. But and I used to have ice bath at my mom's house, but I didn't bring it here because it cracked last year. And I haven't bought a new one.
Shoot.
I know. But I went swimming in Lake Michigan a few weeks ago when I was in Illinois, and I don't know, it's just like this joy that I get now when I do it. But something that I'm like excited to obviously talk about today, and I've always like I've talked it with my fiance and stuff about, but something I felt myself was like, this feels almost like religious in a way.
Yeah, that's the unique part of it.
Yeah, and what I brought into it is prayer, like in my ice baths. That's what I do, like in the shower. That's when I say my morning prayer, is when I'm standing under the cold shower. Like, that's what I do now. And every time I take an ice bath now, it's like, how many Hail Marys am I going to say? That's how I time it. Like,
wow.
I don't know how long my Hail Marys are.
What's your record?
I don't know. My record for the ice bath, it was like 15 degrees out, and I salted my water so it wasn't completely frozen, but I had an axe sitting next to the tub to break it open every day. And I did like 8.5 minutes.
Wow.
That was with my fingers and my toes out of like sticking out a little bit. Yeah. But that was I wasn't like, I don't remember how much I prayed during that one, but definitely a bit. But yeah, it was because, you know, they're obviously more popular, I think, now on social media. You see it a lot, and like the health benefits are being talked about quite a bit. But something that I always felt in my heart that I don't hear a lot of people talk about was like, they think there's like mental benefits, physical benefits, but there's also like a spiritual benefit that I've been kind of experiencing too.
Yeah, no, that's the most interesting part by far from it, because there is a lot of this intersectionality between like these guys that are like on their winter arc, and it's like, okay, we gotta like lock in, and it's just like, gosh, like embrace pain, and like I'm a bad person, and so like I need this pain to kind of like, you know, like free myself or something like that. And then you get these athletes where it's like, you always see that, where it's just like, wow, there's something commendable about like how passionate they are, you know, that this is taking care of their body, you know. But that is another thing I want to talk about. I was like, I actually saw this, like, especially for like hypertrophy or like strength training, that like ice baths can actually like hinder like the muscle recovery there. But then like, yeah, to talk about it as a spiritual experience, like I haven't heard of that before, but that also makes a lot of sense to me. Like, that's not surprising to me, because like throughout my years, I think that like place of prayer is a very, very, very important thing. And like, you know, I think you and I in similar ways would consider ourselves low maintenance. You know, we can get by, you know, with your beef and rice bowls every day and things like that.
I like to think I'm simple in some ways.
Right. And it's like, I definitely am low maintenance in most ways too, but when it comes to prayer, like very high maintenance. Like,
that's interesting.
Like, you know, because when I was in the seminary with 100 other guys, like if I was in the chapel and there was like another person that came in, and even if they sat like 25 pews away on the other side of the church, I'd just be like, no, I just can't pray right now, you know? So it's like, you know, the goal for me is to be able to, you know, pray unceasingly and pray in any position. But I realize that it's like, I need to kind of start with a focused place where that all begins. And so to have that be the ice bath for you is like, is a really interesting concept.
That's definitely one place. I'm like that too. Like, you know, we're in my first home I just bought a few months ago now.
Beautiful.
So, but obviously 2-bedroom, small house. My goal in the future is to have like a dedicated chapel in my home, because I feel that I'm like much more connected. And you know, I try my best, obviously, but when I have a dedicated place to pray. But for me, it's been like in the cold water, just because it doesn't matter where I am physically in the world, whatever. There's always cold water somewhere, you know, for the most part. So that's just been what I've kind of my routine, what I've been doing. And I don't know, maybe like when I made that connection, but pretty early on, where I was like, well, one thing I can do while I'm sitting in there, maybe it was just boredom or like trying to pass the time, was like say my prayers and stuff. And I typically, going back to some of like the physical health benefits, typically do it in the morning. So for me, it was like a good way to start my day, and just like you get out and you're like refreshed and you've done your prayers and stuff like that, and you just feel better overall.
It makes a lot of sense. And like what's very like paradoxical is, you know, people who are like really deep in these practices that appear painful, like ice baths or like cold immersion or just other things. Like I know I have a priest friend who sleeps on the ground, and then running. Like that's kind of where I wanted to go with it, because people talk about the runner's high, where it's like, you know, people, when you first start off running, it's going to be miserable, but then you have people that like talk about how it's like actually strangely like the most like pleasureful thing. And it's like, I've never actually experienced like the runner's high, so I don't know what that's about. But like for you, like in the beginning stages of this, was it really like white knuckling, like, oh, I just have to get through this, and that's kind of what brought you to the prayer kind of as just a way to get through it? Or like, did you feel kind of that runner's high equivalent that you're talking about like pretty early on?
Well, like so we mentioned cross country. I never felt that either. I did cross country. It
just seems like a scam. It's like, I don't know what that is. Like,
some people get it, the runner's high, whatever. And cross country was something I was kind of talking to doing. It's just like, well, I got to do something, I guess. Right? And that's where we bonded. I think we know each other the best from that in Mr. McCarville's class. But yeah, I never really felt that running. But with the ice bath, I know at first it was just like a fun thing to do, and like cold showers, just like, it sucks, but then you just turn it hot, whatever. But like there's scientifically, once you get to like 2 minutes, that's when your body really switches over. And the first like 2, it's like trying to heat itself up. And where you get a lot of the benefits. But then the first 30 seconds are always like the hardest part to get through too. So maybe there is like some like runner's high equivalent like later on in the ice bath, but it's mostly like the feeling you get, and it's what it is a dopamine surge, but it's when you get out and you start warming yourself up, that's like the best feeling, and maybe that's what I'm like chasing. And that is definitely the equivalent of like a runner's high, if you want to compare the two, for sure, is when you get out and you start like warming yourself up. And the best way to do that is like do a little running or something like that. Physical activity, like the best feeling is my routine used to be was I would wake up, go jump in the ice bath for as long as I could at like 5:30 in the morning, which was pitch black out. And I didn't do this every day, but as much as I could. Like 2 years ago, I was pretty consistent, like 3-4 days a week. And then I would get in my car, just like absolutely freezing, shorts and a t-shirt in the middle of winter, and drive to the gym and then go work out. But the feeling of like warming yourself up through physical activity was like really, really nice. So, and obviously there's benefit to doing that. Like,
that's like that, because I actually dabbled with cold showers for a little while, you know, just kind of
the ice bath hits different.
I know it does really.
And that's where I started my prayer routine, I think too, was when I was actually like in the tub, and because you're just kind of sitting there, and I don't know what sparked that though. Like I was trying to reflect on that a little bit, and like what made me think that, but I think I was just like, this is probably a good place to like start praying. And for me it's always been Hail Marys that I do, and so I rate my ice baths like, this is going to be like a 5 Hail Mary ice bath, this is going to be like 10. I'm really ambitious, it's going to be like a 20, you know what I mean?
No, I love it. That's like such a cool rating system. But you're right, like in the cold showers, like I'm kind of just like like it's like dancing around, but like when you're like immersed in the ice bath, like there's nowhere to go, so it's just kind of like, well, I'm here, so why not bring it to like a spiritual plane. And like a funny, you know, you'll be proud of me for this, but you know, in the middle of my cold showers, you know, we took this trip to Nashville to visit some friends, March of 2020. Obviously, you knew what was to come, but then actually one of the worst tornadoes that ever hit Nashville came during that trip. And so,
really?
yeah, it was nuts. Like it completely destroyed a few churches and a lot of the downtown. It like touched down for like 5 miles, and it touched down like 2 blocks away from where we were staying. It was insane to be there. It was like,
Yeah.
it was kind of like looking at like the LA wildfires now, where it like looked like an apocalypse. Where you're just like looking like the block over, and there's like cars that have their windshields like smashed in just by like, you know, different air pressure. Yeah. But we were there, and where I'm going with this is that, you know, thankfully like nothing at the house we're staying at happened. Like the house next door, they had a tree completely fall over, but like we were fine by the grace of God. But power was out, like heat was out, so like there was no option except the cold shower.
You're like, I'm ready for this.
Yeah, I know. And a couple of my friends were like, they're just like, nope, can't do that. And they just like, in a shower. I was like, oh, I can do this. And it wasn't easy, but like I was still like, okay, like I don't think I could have been prepped for it.
Practical life application.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But you're right too about that feeling afterwards, because especially like in the winter, and especially like, you know, when I've stayed in places where it's like you don't have like, you know, a heated bathroom floor or something that, it's kind of like, okay, well, I can enjoy a hot shower now, but then as soon as I get out, it's going to be freezing for a while.
Yeah.
Or I can kind of switch the order of that, and it's like the idea of like delayed gratification there. It's like, it's super powerful.
And I think that also ties into prayer, what you just said, delayed gratification too, for sure. But like specifically to the ice bath, that's exactly it. And that's why I do it in the morning and before exercise too, because like you want to, like I like to be warm throughout the day, and especially like at work, if I'm sitting on the computer, like I get freezing just like sitting still. And I'm a very, like I need to be moving anyways to stay warm. But if you
and I don't carry a lot of body fat. You know, we're prone to being cold and wearing layers.
I'm working on my brown fat, which is what you get from doing that cold exposure. But anyways, when you do cold, your body says, I need to heat up. And so your body will be warmer and run a little bit warmer temperature throughout the day. Yeah. Whereas if you do like a really warm shower in the morning on like a cold day, you're more prone to be, you'll be warm for a little bit, but you're more prone to be cold because your body actually wants to shed heat when you get out of the shower, which is why a warm shower, like at night, I always do a warm shower. I never do an ice bath or a cold shower at night. Yeah. It's like caffeine almost to me because it does like make me awake and stuff, but I do a warm shower before bed because you want your body temperature to drop to fall asleep, and like they say like 3 degrees is what you want your body temperature to or your brain temperature to drop. So a hot shower before bed promotes that because your body's trying to get rid of heat because you're overheated in the shower. And the cold is the same way. It's the opposite of what you think intuitively, but you do cold to get warm. And that's like, you see a lot of things online, people talk about like that inner warmth and stuff like that, and like building your own heat. And that's what I think, like, all right, it's like time to turn on the furnace inside. Get in that's a good way to put it. The cold shower or whatever. But definitely if you're trying to feel, like going back to what you're talking about with the runner's high, if you're trying to feel that, for me, like cold shower doesn't necessarily bring that. For me, that's just like part of my routine now. And like if I just used to, I like the way it feels. But if you really want to get like that feeling of like, oh my gosh, you got to go like cold into the water. Right. So like, I'm pretty like just static person in some sense. Like, you know, I'm enjoying my life, stuff like that, but I'm not always like jumping for joy, and like I'm not like a super bubbly person. Even keeled, But the reason I say that is because like when I went in Lake Michigan a couple weeks ago, I was in Illinois. I was like literally a child after. Like I was so, you can ask my fiance when you see her, but I was just like jumping for joy after because you just feel so good. And what that is like the dopamine surge, but I attribute it to because I'm like doing prayer and stuff like that in the ice bath. So it's nice. Yeah, it's like the way you're describing is almost like you're like jump starting a car or something like that, where it's just like you're just like pouring. It's like almost like the chute at the beginning of a cross country race where you're just kind of like funneling all of these, you know, people running, all of these little, you know, whatever energy, you know, just into like one place. And like going back a little bit to like what you're talking about, how like the first 30 seconds is like the toughest, but then like you kind of get into it. Like it's not even really a question of why is that the case. Like it's so obvious because like I think that and like there's such a like fundamental like deep-seated like kind of need for self-preservation, you know, and like so much of what your body is doing, like period. Like I even think that, and I've heard this, that like memory kind of primarily serves that self-preservation function, because if you have a bad or scary experience, that's going to live in your mind to prevent you from putting yourself in a similar experience again, because your body doesn't want to put yourself in danger. That's,
you know, the inverse with like the positive things like that. And like, I don't know, I've really been thinking deeply, even like the past like 3 weeks, about like how much that characterizes like obviously like the biological, like physiological like functions of our life that would kind of apply to the ice bath. But I think just like that can really, like, if we don't keep it in check, like that kind of affects you like emotionally or spiritually too. Like self-preservation, obviously not a bad thing, but like that can really put you in like a mindset of scarcity where it's like, oh gosh, I don't know like when the next warmth in my life is going to be, so why would I ever put myself in this like ice bath? But it's cool to like very intentionally like combat that by being like, I know I'm going to be okay. I'm not going to like become an ice cube if I like go in this ice bath, you know?
Yeah, when modern living, right, we're very blessed to have all this stuff. You can just go inside and turn the shower on and it's hot,
right,
most of the time for most people. So it's not, I don't think it's a very high risk thing to try out. But it's definitely enjoyable once you get used to it.
Right.
Once you realize the benefits of it. And like tying back to prayer again, it's like the same thing. You can just pray and not really be into it, but once you realize like kind of the fruits of it that come later on with practice and stuff like that, then
right,
I think that's when people really start to appreciate it. But so what I wanted to obviously talk about today's the 12th of January, and just I can't say I planned this, but at church today, the
Feast of the Baptism of Jesus.
Feast of the Baptism, obviously, in the gospel. And that was just like, I was sitting there paying attention, but I was like, oh, this is kind of good timing, because I started just praying in the ice bath, I think probably just to pass the time and just like, you know, or maybe in my head, that's what I think. But really, I think the more I've been thinking about it like the past year, it really ties into faith quite well with baptism and like what that is. And I want to preface this by saying like, the sacraments are very sacred to me. I don't mean to take away from like what a sacrament is. Obviously, baptism through the church is not an ice bath. You have to put that out there. But
yeah, I mean, a lot of the baptismal fonts have heated water, you know, so that you don't get the babies crying.
I'm not trying to say the two are by any means equivalent, but like when I did about a year ago, I helped on Kairos at Rice, and I gave the talk on sacraments. And one thing I really tried to talk about were sacramental moments in your life, and how you make certain moments and interactions with people and things you do sacramental to yourself. And I think that's where I started triggering some of this thought with how the ice bath is like a little sacramental moment in my day. And obviously it's I pray in it and stuff like that. But it ties so well into like, you know, the what baptism is and how it functions and stuff like that. And it's, you know, the re-cleansing, and also ties into kind of like the dying and being reborn aspect of it. So it's just, and then today, obviously, with being the 12th, it was like, that was a perfect time.
Yeah, no, it makes so much sense.
For this conversation.
Yeah, like, and I don't even think that like you have to be too worried about like lessening the value of baptism by like experiencing like that like sacramental moment.
I wouldn't say I'm worried, but obviously I'm not saying it's a replacement.
Right, you just have to contextualize
but
it.
It's certainly a sacramental moment, and you know, baptism is there's a lot of sanctity to it, and that's not what an ice bath is. But when you're saying a few Hail Marys in freezing cold water, there's something special about it.
Right,
Still trying to explore, obviously, through this conversation, but I thought that was pretty good time.
No, yeah, that's just the place to explore it.
Have like led to, for sure. So on just why is it like kind of special and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, like I think, like I'm strongly convicted of the notion that God is intensely interested in every aspect of our lives, and I think we really, like, humans gravitate towards toying around with the notion of the divine in like the peaks of life. So like, you know, in great joy, but then I would say actually more commonly in great sorrow, when people feel empty and are just really searching, like, you know, they kind of reach out to the divine. But like, God is everywhere. And like something I've been really praying with in my own life is just, he is in all seasons. And so that can mean like across the timeline, but I even think like today, the 12th, that means, you know, your full 24 hours. He's there for all of it. And so there is something that I think is more accurate to the way that reality is actually conformed or kind of constructed, to say that God would be present in the ice bath. And to say that it is a sacramental moment is actually more accurate than just being like, oh, this is just kind of like self-care, but then like I go out to pray at a different point in the day. It's like, I actually think that God is very much present there as much as he is throughout the rest of the day. So it's like, that makes a lot of sense to me. And then with the idea of like baptism, I mean, like, yeah, you already mentioned some of like the big points of like the cleansing, but then also like the death and rebirth. Like, I don't think we really like connecting baptism with that thought, because it's like, okay, you have this little like 2-month-old baby, like why are you talking about death? It's like, you know, the priest can't necessarily give that in the homily, but like when I took the class on like the sacraments of initiation in Rome, you know, this priest, Don Bonfrate, so his name literally means good brother. Yeah. He was not my favorite professor, we'll say, but he always talked about how, like, no, like, you don't get it. Like, water is death. Like, we always talk about like water is life, and that's true, but he very much wanted to emphasize how water is death. And like, you're talking about like in like more like ancient civilizations, how like they're land bound, and like before like the boats, you know, you have like the Phoenicians with like the boats, Western Civ and all that, but like, you know, you're landlocked, and like the water out there is where the chaos is. That's where everything scary is. That's where people go to die, and so you stay away from the water. And then like you look at how that is transformed. That's even like the chaos in the creation story in Genesis is water. And then you look at like the significance of like Jesus calming the storm. Like I remember a different professor, American professor, Father Scott Brodeur, he was talking about how like, especially like the Old Testament kind of Jewish mindset of the world was tripartite, where you have like the skies, and that's where you kind of look up towards heaven, and then the earth is where you are right now, but then this water kind of signifies this like this depth, and like that's where like the demonic is, and that's where you see all of this chaos swirling around in the storm. And so it's kind of understandable that the apostles would be quite frightened when, you know, they think that they're going to sink, they're going to be engulfed by like that which signifies chaos. And Jesus has command over the water. And so you look at that entire narrative from Old Testament to New to be that like Jesus brings life to the waters of baptism, but there's actually like a real death concept associated with the water. And like, you know, it was cool. I got this chance to go to, I think it was like the largest man-made waterfall in Europe, if I remember it correctly, but it's called Marmary Falls.
I haven't heard of it.
It's near Greccio, a few hours away from Rome, but it was very interesting just to watch the water, but then like kind of there's like the main falls, but then like there's subsequent falls underneath. And it was just like standing next to one of them, and like even just like thinking about like how many bathtubs full of water are like crashing down on that rock every second, you know? And you talk about like rock is like archetypically like the most like, you know, kind of stable, like permanent object, but then you have something like the Grand Canyon or something that has just completely been carved away by like, like the water over time. So it's just like, you know, water, it comes out of our taps, you know, we need it to live, whatever. But it's just like, it's an intensely like significant reality.
Yeah, there's a lot to it with that. And like, it can be so powerful, water, like you said. But yeah, it's like today and during the homily, I thought it was really well said how the priest was saying that there is a death to it, and water is part of that. And that's kind of what like sparked my thought on that conversation. And going back to like the ice bath, that's how you feel almost. And like, sure, I started with the prayer, just like I wanted to pray while I was doing it, but you feel that, I'm not saying it's like a dying and reborn, but that's how you feel like temperature wise for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you're like, the shock of that first 30 seconds is just like, maybe I'm just weak or whatever, but it's pretty painful.
I don't
you know
think
what I
so.
mean? Like,
I don't think so.
It takes your breath away, right? And then the part of it is like trying to stabilize your breath when you get into the cold, especially if you get your face wet, because your body wants to like suck in air and hold it, especially when your nose gets wet and stuff. So I always try to like intentionally get my face wet, even if I don't go all the way under. But it just makes it harder. Yeah,
that's interesting. I wouldn't have expected that. I would assume that my face is more sensitive, but I didn't know that there would be like a specific response triggered by like water on the nose.
And I might be butchering some of the science behind it, but like when I did my scuba dive training, the first thing they do is they say, before you put your mask on, make sure you get your face wet and then put the mask over it, because if your nose is dry and you're down like however deep you're going, and all of a sudden water gets in your face mask and your nose is dry, it will shock your system, and you'll take like too deep of a breath basically, and you don't want to go. It can induce panic basically. Wow. So I mean, there's so many little intricacies, and obviously when it's cold, I don't think it helps. But yeah, it's like and I think where some of the prayer came from too is like, I'm trying to focus on like breathing calmly and like maintaining a sense of calm. So like when you get in and it's really cold, you're kind of like, you don't want to breathe or anything, but then it's like, okay, Hail Mary, full of grace. Like I say it out loud as much as I can because I'm trying to like use it to control my breath and stuff like that too. And it's like that you feel like you're dying and then you start to feel better. And as soon as you get out, it's like this childlike joy basically that you have, which is like all the chemicals in your body going like what just happened. Right. But it's a really great feeling. And obviously as you get warm and stuff like that, it's it brings a sense of happiness that is a very natural and healthy sense of happiness, and I think it just ties in so well with some of the principles of baptism and things like that. It's just like a little sacramental moment.
Yeah, well, I think the most powerful.
You feel rejuvenated after.
Right? Yeah, no, for sure. And like I think the most powerful aspect of what you just described there is that it is precisely when you feel that acute pain, because it's not just a discomfort. Like I've been in the ice and it's just like you actually like feel like tingling like in your hands and things like that, but that is a direct pathway. It's not like despite your pain, oh, I guess I'll do this. It's like it is a direct pathway towards prayer, especially like specifically in your case with like the Blessed Mother. And I think that is an incredibly powerful tool that I actually haven't heard that much about. But I think my 4th year at Sacred Heart Major Seminary, we had this talk by this sister that came in, and she was just really talking to all the seminarians and priests about like just like addiction and struggle and all of these things and really like temptation. And she talked about this kind of like scientific approach to like kind of rerouting your temptation, where like she talked about like whatever state you find yourself, like if you find yourself in temptation, like you need to like think about like 5 things that you feel, like sense of touch. So it's like, okay, I feel like my shoes kind of around my ankles, or I feel, your warm floors,
My floor is cold.
That's why we have the heater on. But, or like, my arm on the table, or even like, like this jacket thing like against my collar. Yeah. And then like 5 things that you're hearing right now. And just like, so there's kind of that grounding sense of it. But the interesting thing is that when you feel like the temptation or even just like negative approach, like emotion, like you're feeling prone to like getting gossipy or whatever, bring that to prayer immediately. Because like you've heard of like Pavlov's dogs and things like that, where you have like trigger response, which is a very like behavior sort of way of looking at psychology. But if you're able to almost like retrain those triggers to bring you towards prayer instead of what they're supposed to bring you towards, which is like, like sin or just like isolation, then it's just like, how could you come up with a more frustrating response to what the devil is doing? Like you're actually using what he is giving you and like still bringing it to God. And so it's just like, like in your case with like the ice baths, whenever you feel like that pain or discomfort, if you like use that as a channel to prayer, then it's just shower. Like, like you're unstoppable. And like, I've thought about that. Like I remember I was so proud of myself like 3 years ago because I had this dream, of course, this crazy dream where it's just like you're on like the verge of death, So, we all have. But like I was in this car and like, it went off a cliff or something like that. And I said an Our Father like while we were in the air, and I was just like, it's kind of like a comical thing, but seriously, I was like, wow, like I hope that would, if that were to actually happen, that would be the way to go. And it's just like throughout my time, like in formation for the priesthood, I found the most growth when I have found myself turning to prayer in the most difficult moments. And like I think that's a marker of someone who is like pursuing their faith, is that they are willing to do that. But I just think it's like almost like a scientific reality, like you're talking about, of like redirecting that pain and kind of using it as a trigger to go to your Hail Marys.
It could be pain, but you're trying to get benefit from it too. And it's a great way to live your life in general, because among all of God's graces, life is never easy all the time for everybody. And it's just for me, I take an ice bath or a cold shower in the morning. I'm like, what can't I do today? So it really helps you just, and like prayer is just like that, where you get that feeling of like, what can't I do now? You know what I mean? And it I don't know, the two really funnel together really well. And it's, I don't know, it's just become such a nice part of my day and how I do it. But I think too, there was something you said, I was trying so hard to remember that.
I'll just say it all again.
Yeah, say it all again. But with the ice bath, what was I going to say that was another big part of it? I blanked on it.
The pain of it, or redirecting it?
It'll come back to me. But
for sure.
But yeah, I don't know, like it's been nice to obviously talk about this, just because like thought about it quite a bit, and like how do you tie these two together? Because obviously you have like the mental and physical, and now you have kind of like it's a spiritually healthy for me is how I feel about it too.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's something like you want to go around and like, oh, I'm so good because I can pray.
Yeah, like I have this silver bullet, you know, that's going to change your life because all of a sudden you become like a salesperson. But like you're also like, I will say this, even if you're going to be humble about it, like you live a very principled lifestyle. Like you're very much about your business. And like I remember even like when I was kind of gearing up to go to Rome in 2021 and I was hanging out with you in Biondo in downtown Detroit, and you were really talking about like how like, yeah, you did this like sleep test and it was like life changing, and you're all about like, you know, like the mouth tape and things like that. It's just like, it's very clear to me, and I think I share a similar interest with you, but I think you're even like better about like actually like implementing these practices of like, I want to like enjoy my life and like take health seriously. And like, you know, you talk about like, yeah, like, you know, this kind of covers a multitude of health fields, but like this is something that like was really important for me to hear. Like I was listening to this one person give a talk, and they're talking about like, in some sense, like talking about, because like mental health is such like a big topic today, mental health, emotional health, physical health, spiritual health. In some sense, it's like a false dichotomy. Yeah, it's like you can just be healthy in general, and that will infuse itself into all of those aspects of your life, because like we are, you know, we are comprised of, you know, a complexity of just systems. Like, you know, there's just such a complexity and a depth to like just the human person. It's like by far the most complex thing that you could ever study is you know, the human mind.
Yeah. So sorry, my thought, I remembered it now.
There you go.
Was that like a lot of times, well, the church teaches that, you know, where the two are gathered, Christ is among them, right? And that's a great time to pray. But also, I've always kind of thought of the dichotomy where Christ goes off on his own and prays too, because that happens quite a bit in the gospel. And so I look at the cold immersion, like typically I'm by myself, and sometimes I'm sitting in a tub in like the just, you know, middle of the morning, it's dark outside.
Right.
And that's kind of a dark moment, but for me, I, you know, brought prayer into it, whatever, and I'd never feel alone doing it, obviously, when you're in prayer. But then it's very fun to do, like, with friends, like, well, like, you get people together. Like, I've been convincing my fiance to come jump in Lake Michigan.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, is she open to it?
Oh yeah, she loves it now.
Oh man,
well, I don't know about loves it, but she'll do it with me now. But it's like, it's the same
great.
thing where, like I can make this kind of like a moment where I'm like on my own, and, you know, now I'm living here by myself, stuff like that. And it's like a hard thing to do that I can go pray in and stuff like that, and basically go out and pray on my own in the quiet of the night while I'm freezing. But it's also like such a fun thing to do with someone else too, right? And because you see them experience that joy, and that's what I was trying to tie in the thought earlier. Which is a very important thing to me. And you know, another part of it is like, I feel like I'm not always really great at praying when everything's going very well. You know, I always feel a sense of gratitude, but for me, it's always been my deepest prayers when I'm suffering, and maybe that's where like this tied in a little bit, because you know, you're temporarily suffering at least.
Right. Yeah. No. There's no like diminishment of it. Like it is true suffering. You know that you're going to be okay. That doesn't make it feel.
You hope you're going to be.
Yeah. To remember to come out. You know. After a while.
Well, so I intentionally didn't buy a steel tub, because what I bought for my first ice bath was just like a water trough that they sell at Tractor Supply, like 100-gallon trough for like a horse thing horses drink out of, and they had like a plastic composite one and then the steel ones, and I was thinking like, don't you stick to metal like when it gets cold? Isn't that like don't lick the pole or something like that? Sorry, totally off topic, but get yourself a composite
right,
not a steel one if you go to Tractor Supplies, where I got mine, and they sell them at Costco.
Yeah, well actually someone dropped off an ice bath that like they just like donated to Our Lady of the Fields, but it's almost like it's like a circle, maybe the size of this table, but like, you know, obviously a circle is, you know, it would be an oval if it was as long as that. But like, it's kind of just like PVC poles, and then like almost like canvas is like the basin for it. So, you know, if you know, I won't say if, I will try it out. I'll try it out.
You also have a lake there. I mean,
I know. Yeah, just jump in the lake.
I'll have to come visit you. And
we can do it. Yeah, we can do a pour.
Yeah, if you're gonna do it for your first like time, obviously it's good to build up in the shower, because like you can control that very easily. Yeah, don't go jump in a lake like by yourself.
Yeah, that's probably a bit dangerous.
I'll do that sometimes if I'm on my own, and like I still somewhat feel safe
but
to me,
because
I know
about.
I can control my body and stuff. But yeah, don't do that for the first time. It's like Don't get yourself in trouble up there.
Lorenzo Spagnuolo wants you to.
I'll have to come visit you. We can do it together.
Yeah, I'll do it with
jump
you.
In the water and
but like,
you tell me how many Hail Marys you want to do before you get out. See if you can do one.
I'll show you. I mean, all my years, I can pray Hail Mary pretty darn fast. You'd be surprised. Like sometimes when you hear seminarians, praying rosaries and we're all together, it'd be like. Sometimes the Hail Mary sounds like it's like 6 words, even though it's like over 50 or something, because you're just putting them all together. But anyways, like I think, like you're talking about like the communal aspect of prayer, but then the individual part of it. And like I gravitate very heavily towards the individual aspect of prayer. I think that obviously God is intensely interested in our lives. He knows how we are constructed because guess what? He was the general contractor, on the build and things like that. But like, he knows that like we have like variation in like temperaments and personalities. So it's just like I see people that are like very extroverted and like are very built up by the sense of community. I think the members of my choir at St. Ambrose, like I tell people, and like they'd be the first ones to admit this. This is like 1 part musical talent to like 10 parts like community. It's great.
That's
it's like a social gathering and things like that. And like a lot of their experience of being connected to that parish is like being a part of the group, and we were singing together yesterday for the confirmation of all these 9th graders, and it was great. But like one thing, this was keep on talking all about my Rome professors, but I love them. But there's this one guy from Belgium, Father Amari Begas. He had this French name, but he was from Belgium. But he talked about there's this theologian called Romano Guardini, very well known, but he wrote a lot about the aloneness of Christ, and he cited a little passage of it, and it was like so interesting. Like I had to go read the whole thing, but like you look in the Gospels and you see how like Jesus like never had a home of his own, so he was always staying with other people. He was eternally present to others, but yet no one could like fully understand him, like just for how fully God and fully man. It's just he was always left to be misunderstood. And like there's just such an aloneness that's present at the crucifixion. And like I mean a lot of that is kind of the darker side of aloneness. I would say solitude is the more neutral kind of term for it, but like I really experience God in that solitude a lot, and I don't think that that's like lesser than the communal aspect of prayer, but it's both very, and very like important. It's a lie to say that like man is an island where it's just like you can go off and have a perfectly healthy prayer life completely disconnected from like the sense of like capital C church and like outside the ideas of like community and tradition. But like you also don't have to be like praying with someone else for God to show up. It's not like it's not like the high occupancy like vehicle lane where it's like carpool lane where it's like, oh, if you're only one person, like God's not there for you. You got to get another person with you. But it's just like I really think it is like a diet, and I think a lot of things are like a diet where it's just like you cannot give a blanket statement for things. There's going to be variation, and it's kind of everyone's like divine responsibility to understand like where prayer lies for them. So it's like our executive Mike Hickey, executive director, I was telling you, like Mike, he's a sauna guy, he's kind of the opposite of you, you're ice bath and he's sauna guy. But it's just like, if people were to do the investigation as much as they care about things like diet, because some people are really like intense about like, I'm going to like do keto for a year and like really experience that. If people took that same level of like research into like where they can kind of tap into that, the well that never runs dry, to bring back the water imagery of like, you will, and I've been praying a lot with like Psalm 23 where like, the Lord is my shepherd, there's nothing I shall want. He will lead me to like green pastures or like fresh waters. There's also that nourishing aspect of it. There's so many water
connections in the Bible.
I know, amazing. So it's like in a strange sense, even though it seems a bit counterintuitive, like these ice baths and like this water is nourishing you, but it's just in a different way than just like quenching thirst, Yeah,
because at first I was like, this is not like, not that I was like trying to separate the two, but I was like, this is not like a religious experience. I'm just like some 20-something-year-old jumping in cold water for fun, and I probably have some problem with it.
Some psycho
or
something.
But then it's like, well, why not? You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of the take home here. Like, sure, if you go home, hopefully you take a cold shower tomorrow morning and jump in the lake. But do
them both.
Don't do both. The take home is like you can make and what I spoke about it pretty much a year ago at Kairos is you can make any moment sacramental, like something that you do or something that you'll enjoy doing. There's no reason not to, because at first I was like, is it weird to kind of tie the two, that I feel like I'm doing something like healthy, mentally beneficial and religious at the same time? But I think that's what you should do in life. It's kind of my perspective and how it's been formed. And this is something that's helped me form that perspective, is like, that's kind of the whole purpose of having God in your life day and day and stuff like that, is that why isn't that moment sacramental? And so obviously it ties very well to the sacrament of baptism.
Oh, yeah. No, that's like an obvious connection, but yeah.
Anything can be like that, you know, with the sacraments and just enjoying the little things in life that you do.
Right. Yeah, and I've mentioned this before, like on the podcast, but like this idea that I think so much of the world today buys into, the idea that nothing means anything. It's just like, oh, you know, I'll do this, or it doesn't really matter, no one really cares, sort of thing. The opposite of that is that everything means everything. That there is blueprints, there is like intentionality behind everything.
Yeah.
Every moment happens for a reason, and there's kind of this narrative thread that is weaved through everything. And so, you know, to kind of land there, to say that it's just like, yeah, there's no embarrassment in connecting that to a divine encounter, because guess what? You can encounter the divine in anywhere place, because he is everywhere.
For sure. All right. Well, that was very good to talk about. This was like the perfect audience, I think, for it, because
it's good.
It's a thought I've been forming for a while, and just like trying to tie it all together. But yeah, go take an ice bath.
No, yeah, like we're not.
Shower, it'll be physically, spiritually, and mentally beneficial for you.
Yeah,
it's a win-win-win.
Right, win-win-win, triple win. And like the psychologist, or the psychologist that was assigned to the North American College in Rome, Dr. Mark Glavke, incredibly insightful person. But like the question that he would always ask, kind of as a barometer for how you're doing, is like, are you happy, healthy, and holy? And it's just like, it kind of talks to what you're mentioning there, where it's just like, as long as you're experiencing those three things, that's a pretty good indication that it's just like things are in right order in your life. But yeah, you're right. Like, I'm glad that
I'm getting all three out of my cold immersion.
Right, yeah, and it's like we got to walk through that live. Like, we're not here to just like tell everyone our like big thoughts, something like that. It's like, you know, I think part of the gift of the other is to kind of work through these things and make sense of it, because like I have my own blind spots, and so to be able to talk about some of these things helps me kind of round out a lot of.
Well, I would love to
ideas.
Share an experience too that someone else could find religious and benefit from.
Yeah.
And I think the benefits certainly outweigh the 2 minutes of cold you're going to
experience.
Yeah,
for sure. So always kind of as a closer with the podcast, I always ask the guests, is there anything that we can pray for you for?
I'd like to pray. I'm going to keep their identities out of it, but there's a couple that would like to conceive a child I'd like to pray for specifically. Yeah,
absolutely. All right, no time like the present. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. God, you are the giver of all things. You are the one who breathes life into us, the one who speaks order among the chaos. Please breathe life into us in this moment. Help us to truly enjoy the life that we have. Thank you for the gift of your sacraments and the grace that you confer through those means. Help us to ever be more edified by the grace that you are so willing to bestow in our lives, and help us to be more attentive and receptive to all of the ways in which you are pouring grace upon us. In a special way, since you love life so dearly, please help this couple that they may bring life into this world and experience the joy of generations. Lord, thank you not only for what you give us or what you do for us, but thank you simply for who you are. Help us to always stay yoked to you, close to you, so that we may evermore enjoy relationship with you and what it means to be a child of God. We ask this all through the most holy name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Yeah, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Good, sir.
Great conversation.
That was awesome. Sweet, dude.
Look, I'm not a bad person, okay? First off, his mom pulled me aside and told me to do this. His fiancée was in on it too. I mean, she got out of the way pretty quick. I mean, I know it doesn't look good for me here, but if you listen to episode 6, it's clear that ice baths are one of Lorenzo's favorite things.
Should have seen that one coming.